The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Her black hair, usually pulled back in an elegant bun during work hours, had loosened slightly during her rushed lunch break, a few strands framing her face as she hurried down the hall. Room 314, or was it 415, she muttered to herself, checking the crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Her colleague Marcus had texted her the room number after his appendix surgery, but her phone had frozen mid-conversation. Again. The device had been acting up for weeks, much like everything else in her life lately. She paused outside a door marked 314, taking a deep breath. The familiar weight of her pharmacy badge hung from her coat, along with the collection of small pins she'd gathered over the years, a tiny coffee cup, a smiling pill bottle, and her favorite, a pin that read, "Pharmacy Technician, because even doctors need drugs." Pushing the door open quietly, Manuela stepped inside, expecting to find Marcus propped up in bed, probably complaining about hospital food or asking her to sneak him a decent burger from their usual spot downtown. Instead, she froze. The room was dimly lit, filled with the steady beeping of medical equipment. In the bed lay a man she didn't recognize, tall, even lying down, with perfectly trimmed dark hair and a full beard that gave him an almost regal appearance. His skin was pale, but there was something familiar about the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands rested on the white hospital blanket. Manuela's brown eyes widened as she took a step backward, her heart suddenly racing. She should leave. This was clearly the wrong room and she had no business being here. But something on the bedside table caught her attention, a white envelope with elegant handwriting across the front. Her breath caught in her throat. The name written in careful script read, Manuela. Her hands trembled slightly as she moved closer, her sneakers silent on the hospital floor. The envelope sat next to a small stack of medical files and what appeared to be personal belongings, an expensive-looking watch, a set of car keys with a distinctive logo, and a fountain pen that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent. She reached for the envelope with shaking fingers, her mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why did he have her name written in his handwriting? The paper felt heavy, expensive, nothing like the cheap stationery she was used to. As she carefully opened it, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside, her world tilted on its axis. The handwriting was masculine, confident, but there was something achingly familiar about the way certain letters curved, the particular slant of the words. And then she read the message that made her knees weak. To the girl who still makes my world spin, even after all these years, even in my dreams, it's always been you. I never forgot the way you laughed at my terrible jokes, or how you'd steal the last piece of watermelon at summer barbecues. I know I disappeared without explanation, and I know you probably hate me for it. But I'm hoping, praying, that somewhere in that brilliant heart of yours, there's still room for the boy who used to watch Fresh Prince reruns with you until we both fell asleep on your grandmother's couch. Manuela's vision blurred as tears formed in her eyes. She looked up from the letter to study the man's face more carefully, searching for traces of the boy she once knew. The boy who had vanished from her life without a word when they were teenagers, leaving behind only questions and a broken heart she'd spent years trying to mend. And then she saw it, a small scar just above his left eyebrow, barely visible now, but one she remembered perfectly. He'd gotten it falling off his bike while trying to impress her when they were 12. "Lucas?" she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. Lucas Everett Sumner, her childhood best friend. The boy who had shared her dreams and secrets, the one who had broken her heart by leaving without explanation. And now, somehow, he was here, unconscious, unreachable, but holding onto a letter with her name on it. The letter trembled in her hands as 15 years of buried emotions crashed over her like a tidal wave. Manuela sank into the visitor's chair beside Lucas's bed, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The white envelope fell to her lap as she stared at his peaceful face, searching for traces of the boy who used to make her laugh until her stomach hurt. The boy who had vanished from her life like morning mist, leaving nothing but questions and the ache of abandonment. "This can't be real," she whispered, unconsciously reaching up to adjust her hair, a nervous habit she'd carried since childhood. Her fingers found the loose strands that had escaped her bun, twisting them anxiously as she tried to process what she was seeing. The machines around Lucas beeped steadily, creating a rhythm that seemed to match her racing heartbeat. She studied his features more carefully now, noting how his boyish face had matured into sharp masculine lines. His beard was perfectly groomed even in his unconscious state, and she could see the expensive cut of his hospital gown, the way even his personal belongings spoke of success and wealth. He looked nothing like the Lucas she remembered, the one who wore hand-me-down sneakers and shared his lunch money when she forgot hers. The one who would spend entire Saturday afternoons with her, playing basketball in her backyard until the streetlights came on and her grandmother called them in for dinner. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, startling her back to reality. A text from her co-worker. "Girl, you've been gone for an hour. Mrs. Peterson is asking for her blood pressure meds, and you know how she gets." Manuela glanced at the time and realized she'd completely lost track. Her lunch break had ended 30 minutes ago, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Not yet. Not when she was sitting next to the biggest mystery of her life. She picked up the letter again, reading it more slowly this time. The handwriting was definitely older, more refined than she remembered, but certain quirks remained the same. The way he dotted his I's, the slight slant to his capital letters. It was unmistakably Lucas. "Fresh Prince reruns," she said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the emotional chaos in her chest. God, we must have watched every episode 100 times. She remembered how they'd argue over who got to be Will and who had to be Carlton during their impromptu dance sessions, both of them terrible dancers, but laughing too hard to care. Her grandmother's old couch had been their sanctuary during those hot Carolina summers. They'd spread out homework between them, sharing bags of generic chips and arguing over math problems until they'd inevitably get distracted by whatever was on TV. Lucas had always been better at science, while she'd helped him with English essays, their pencils crossing paths as they worked. "You were supposed to help me with my college applications," she continued, her voice catching slightly. "We had it all planned out. You were going to study medicine and I was going to—" She trailed off, realizing she couldn't even remember what her 17-year-old self had wanted to study. Everything had changed when he disappeared. The memory hit her like a physical blow, coming home from school one October afternoon to find his house empty, a "for sale" sign already planted in the front yard. No explanation, no goodbye, no forwarding address. Just an empty house and the echo of her own footsteps as she'd stood on his front porch, waiting for someone to tell her it was all a mistake. Her nail found its way to her mouth before she realized what she was doing, another old habit that surfaced when anxiety took hold. She forced her hand back down, embarrassed by the nervous gesture even though no one was watching. "Where did you go, Lucas?" she asked the silent room. "And why didn't you take me with you?" The questions she'd carried for 15 years tumbled out in a whisper. Had she done something wrong? Said something that pushed him away? She'd replayed their last conversation 1,000 times, searching for clues in every word, every gesture, every laugh they'd shared. Their last day together had been so ordinary, walking home from school, talking about the upcoming homecoming dance, arguing over whether they should go together as friends, or if that would be too weird. She'd been wearing her favorite butterfly clips in her hair, and he'd been carrying his worn backpack with the broken zipper that never quite closed. "You said you'd think about it," she murmured, remembering how her 15-year-old heart had hammered when he'd smiled that crooked smile of his. "You said we'd talk about it the next day." But the next day never came. At least, not the one she'd been expecting. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from the pharmacy. She let it go to voicemail, unable to leave this moment, this room, this impossible reunion with her past. Looking at Lucas's peaceful face, she wondered what kind of man he'd become. The expensive watch on his bedside table suggested success, but what about happiness? Had he ever thought about her over the years, or was she just a footnote in the story of his life? The letter suggested otherwise, but letters could lie. People could romanticize the past, paint it in golden hues that had never really existed. "I spent so many nights wondering if you were okay," she confessed to his sleeping form. "So wondering if you'd found everything you were looking for when you left Raleigh behind." She reached out hesitantly, her fingers hovering just above his hand. His skin looked warm, alive, so different from the cold goodbye she'd never gotten. Part of her wanted to touch him, to confirm he was real, but something held her back. What if he woke up and didn't remember her the way she remembered him? What if 15 years had erased what had felt so important to her teenage heart? The door behind her creaked softly, and Manuela jumped, quickly folding the letter and standing up. A nurse peeked in, her expression curious but kind. "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I didn't realize Mr. Sumner had a visitor," the nurse said, checking her clipboard. "Are you family?" Manuela's throat felt dry as sandpaper. Though I think I'm in the wrong room. I was looking for someone else." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. 2 days later, Manuela still couldn't focus on anything except the weight of that letter in her purse. Earth to Manny, Tasha Renee Morrow's voice cut through her fog as she waved a hand in front of her face. Girl, you've been stirring that coffee for 5 minutes straight. Either you're trying to create a whirlpool or something serious is eating at you. Manuela blinked, looking down at her mug at Grind Coffee House, their usual Tuesday evening spot in downtown Raleigh. The foam art had completely dissolved, and her spoon was making metallic clinking sounds against the ceramic. Around them, the familiar buzz of conversation mixed with the hiss of espresso machines and indie music playing softly overhead. Sorry, she mumbled, finally setting down the spoon. Just tired, I guess. Tasha leaned back in her chair, her afro perfectly framed by a colorful bandana tied with artistic precision. Her brown eyes studied Manuela with the intensity of someone who'd known her best friend for over a decade. She was wearing her usual outfit, black leggings, an oversized denim jacket covered in patches from various music festivals, and her signature beaded bracelets that clinked softly when she moved. Don't even try that with me, Tasha said, taking a sip of her chai latte. I've seen you tired. This is different. You've been weird ever since you got back from your lunch break on Monday, and yesterday you literally mixed up Mrs. Johnson's diabetes medication with her neighbor's arthritis pills. Manuela winced. That had been a close call, caught only because Mrs. Johnson had questioned why her usual white pills were suddenly blue. Her supervisor had given her a concerned look and suggested she take a mental health day if she needed it. It's nothing, Manuela said, but her voice lacked conviction. She reached up unconsciously to adjust her hair, pulling it tighter into its ponytail. Tonight she'd opted for a casual look, jeans, her favorite meme t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," and worn sneakers that had seen better days. Tasha's laugh was loud and musical, causing a few nearby customers to glance over with amused smiles. Girl, please. You're sitting here looking like someone told you Santa Claus wasn't real. What happened? Did your dating app finally match you with someone who wasn't a total disaster? Because honestly, after that guy who asked if you wanted to Netflix and actually chill on the first date. It's not about dating, Manuela interrupted, then immediately regretted it because Tasha's eyebrows shot up with interest. Oh, so it is about a man. Tasha leaned forward, her bracelets jangling as she clasped her hands together. Spill. Now. Manuela felt her resolve crumbling. She'd been carrying this secret for 2 days, and it was eating her alive. Every time she tried to focus on work, she'd see Lucas's peaceful face. Every time she tried to sleep, she'd hear his voice from their childhood, calling her name across her grandmother's backyard. She reached into her purse and pulled out the letter, still folded in its expensive envelope. I found this. Tasha's eyes widened as she took in the elegant handwriting. Okay, that's definitely not your chicken scratch. Who wrote you a love letter, and why do you look like it's bad news? It's... Manuela paused, trying to find the right words. It's from Lucas. The name hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Tasha had heard stories about Lucas over the years, fragments of Manuela's past that she'd shared during late-night conversations and wine-fueled reminiscing sessions. She knew about the boy who'd disappeared, about the first heartbreak that had shaped how Manuela approached relationships ever since. Lucas? Tasha's voice dropped to a whisper. Childhood best friend Lucas? The one who... Vanished, yeah. Manuela nodded, feeling tears prick at her eyes. I walked into the wrong hospital room and there he was, unconscious. This letter was on his bedside table. Tasha carefully took the envelope, her usual animated energy subdued by the gravity of the moment. Can I? Manuela nodded, watching as her best friend read the letter with growing amazement. Tasha's expressions were always transparent. Her face was like a movie screen, showing every emotion as it crossed her mind. First surprise, then sympathy, then something that looked suspiciously like excitement. Manny, she said slowly, folding the letter back up. This man never forgot you. 15 years, girl. 15 years, and he's still thinking about you. Or he's romanticizing the past, Manuela countered, taking a large gulp of her now cold coffee. People do that, you know. They remember things better than they actually were. Don't you dare. Tasha's voice was firm, but gentle. Don't you dare minimize this. This letter, this is real, raw. He's talking about specific memories, specific things that mattered to both of you. Manuela felt her nail find its way to her mouth again, a nervous habit that had gotten worse since Monday. But what if he wakes up and doesn't remember writing it? What if he's changed completely? What if the sky falls down? Tasha interrupted with another musical laugh. Girl, you're borrowing trouble from tomorrow when you haven't even dealt with today. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, Manuela said quickly. I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to pretend it never happened and go back to my normal life. Tasha stared at her for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Within seconds, Manuela's phone buzzed with a notification. She looked down to see a meme Tasha had sent. A picture of a woman standing in front of a burning house with the caption, "This is fine." That's you right now, Tasha said, gesturing to the phone. Sitting in the wreckage of what could be the most romantic second-chance love story ever, telling yourself everything is fine. It's not that simple, Manuela protested. He's in a coma, Tasha. And even if he wakes up, what then? He's clearly successful now. Did you see his watch, his clothes? He's not the same boy I knew. And you're not the same girl, Tasha pointed out. You're a grown woman with her own life, her own dreams, her own strength. Maybe that's exactly what both of you need. Manuela looked out the coffee shop window at the evening traffic, people heading home from work, living their normal, predictable lives. Part of her envied them, their simplicity, their lack of earth-shattering letters from the past. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of course you are, Tasha said, her voice gentle now. But baby, what if this is your chance? What if this is the universe saying, hey, remember that love you never got closure on? Here's your opportunity. Or what if it's the universe setting me up for heartbreak all over again? Tasha reached across the table and took her hand. Then at least you'll know. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what if. And besides, she added with a grin, I'll be here to help you key his car if he breaks your heart again. Despite everything, Manuela found herself laughing. You're terrible. I'm loyal, Tasha corrected. There's a difference. Now the real question is, are you going to go back to that hospital, or are we going to sit here and pretend you're not dying to see him again? Manuela's phone buzzed with another text from Tasha, this time a gif of a woman dramatically throwing papers in the air with the caption YOLO. She looked at her best friend's expectant face, then down at the letter in her hands. I don't even know if he's awake yet, she said softly. Only one way to find out, Tasha replied with a knowing smile. She stood outside room 314 for 10 minutes before finding the courage to knock. Manuela had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on her favorite jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. She'd told herself she was just being considerate. Visiting hours had official protocols after all, but the truth was, her heart had been hammering since she'd left her apartment, and she needed every ounce of confidence she could muster. The letter was tucked safely in her purse, along with a small gift bag containing something she'd impulsively bought on her way to the hospital. A package of those watermelon-flavored popsicles they used to fight over during summer afternoons. It felt silly now, standing in the sterile hospital corridor, but she couldn't bring herself to leave it in the car. You can do this, she whispered to herself, adjusting her hair one final time. It's just Lucas. Just the boy who used to help you with math homework, except it wasn't just Lucas anymore. According to the internet research, she'd definitely not stayed up until 2 a.m. conducting. Dr. Lucas Everett Sumner was now a renowned neurosurgeon who'd revolutionized several medical procedures and parlayed his innovations into a biotech fortune. His professional headshots showed a confident man in expensive suits, nothing like the gangly teenager who used to trip over his own feet playing basketball. She knocked gently on the door, hearing a voice call, "Come in," from the other side. Her breath caught, even deeper now, but unmistakably his. Pushing the door open, she stepped inside to find Lucas sitting up in bed, very much awake, reading what appeared to be a medical journal. He looked up as she entered, and the magazine fell forgotten to his lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The years fell away like autumn leaves, and Manuela was 15 again, staring into those same green eyes that had haunted her dreams for over a decade. His hair was shorter now, more refined, and the beard was definitely new, but the way he looked at her, like she was the most important thing in the room, was exactly the same. "Manuela," his voice was uncertain, almost disbelieving. "Is it really you?" She nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. "Hi, Lucas." He ran a hand over his face, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his IV line. "I thought I was dreaming. The nurses said someone had been asking about me, but I never imagined—" He trailed off, studying her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "You look exactly the same." "Liar," she said with a small laugh, some of her nervousness easing. "I'm pretty sure I've aged a day or 2 since high school." "Beautiful as ever," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with 15 years of unspoken words. Manuela fidgeted with the strap of her purse, while Lucas absently drummed his fingers against the bedrail, a habit she remembered from their childhood, usually surfacing when he was working through a difficult problem. "I found your letter," she said finally. His fingers stilled, and she watched color rise in his cheeks above his beard. "You weren't supposed to, I was going to—" He rubbed his beard, another gesture that was new but somehow familiar. "God, this isn't how I imagined this conversation going." "You imagined this conversation?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Every day for the past 15 years, he admitted quietly. "Manny, I know I have a lot to explain. I know I hurt you when I left and You disappeared," she interrupted, the words carrying more emotion than she'd intended. "One day you were there, and the next day your house was empty. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Lucas closed his eyes, pain flickering across his features. "My father got a job offer in Boston. He said we had to leave immediately that night. I begged him to let me say goodbye to you, but he said clean breaks were easier. That we were too young for it to matter in the long run." "Too young for it to matter?" Manuela's voice cracked slightly. "Lucas, you were my best friend, my everything. How could he say it didn't matter?" "Because he didn't understand," Lucas said, his green eyes intense as they met hers. "He didn't understand that leaving you felt like cutting out half of my heart. He didn't understand that every major moment of my life since then has felt incomplete because you weren't there to share it with me." The raw honesty in his voice took her breath away. She sank into the visitor's chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "I tried to find you," he continued. "When I turned 18, I hired a private investigator, but your grandmother had passed, and you'd moved. No social media presence, no digital footprint. It was like you'd vanished just as completely as I had. I was protecting myself," she said quietly. "After you left, I didn't trust easily. Still don't, if I'm being honest." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, processing the weight of their revelations. Finally, Lucas spoke again. "I wrote you letters," he said, "hundreds of them over the years. Never sent them, but I kept writing. That one on the bedside table. I wrote it the night before my accident. I was finally ready to hire another investigator, to really commit to finding you." "What changed?" she asked. He smiled, and for a moment she saw the boy she'd fallen for all those years ago. "I turned 33 last month, had this whole elaborate birthday party at some fancy restaurant downtown, surrounded by colleagues and acquaintances, but all I could think about was our birthdays when we were kids, how your grandmother would make us a cake to share since we were born 3 days apart, how we'd sit on your back porch eating ourselves sick on frosting and making wishes on those ridiculous trick candles that wouldn't blow out." Manuela found herself smiling, despite the emotional chaos in her chest. "You always wished for the same thing. That we'd be friends forever," he finished, his eyes soft with memory. "Turns out some wishes have a longer expiration date than others." "Lucas," she started, then stopped, overwhelmed by everything she wanted to say and couldn't find words for. "I know this is a lot," he said gently. "I know I don't have the right to just waltz back into your life after 15 years and expect anything. But Manny, if you'll let me, I'd like to try to earn back what I lost. What we lost." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down to see a message from Tasha. "Girl, you better not be chickening out right now. Remember, fortune favors the bold." Lucas caught her smile at the message. "Friend of yours?" "My best friend Tasha. She's persistent." "Smart woman," he said, "though I have to admit I'm jealous. I used to be your best friend." "You were a lot of things to me, Lucas Sumner," she said softly, meeting his gaze. Best friend was just the beginning. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and the weight of history. Lucas's eyes darkened, and for a moment the sophisticated doctor disappeared entirely, replaced by the boy who used to look at her like she hung the moon. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. Manuela took a deep breath, thinking of Tasha's encouragement, of the letter that had started all this, of the 15-year question mark that had shaped too much of her life. "Now," she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out the gift bag, "we start with these." She handed him the popsicles, watching as his face broke into the biggest smile she'd seen since walking into the room. "Watermelon," he said wonderingly. "You remembered." "I remember everything, Lucas. That's the problem." 3 days later, Lucas was discharged with strict orders to take it easy, advice he promptly ignored by asking Manuela to meet him for coffee. You know, when most people get out of the hospital, they go home and rest, Manuela said as she slid into the booth across from him at Murphy's Diner, a local institution known for its bottomless coffee and pie that could cure heartbreak. The red vinyl seats were cracked with age, and the jukebox in the corner was playing something by Boyz II Men that transported her straight back to their teenage years. Lucas grinned, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug like it was precious cargo. He'd traded his hospital gown for dark jeans and a navy polo that made his green eyes even more striking. The clothes fit him perfectly, expensive but not showy, the kind of casual that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Most people don't get a second chance with their childhood sweetheart, he said, then caught himself. I mean, best friend. Childhood best friend. Nice save, she teased, but her cheeks warmed at the slip. She'd been doing that a lot lately, blushing like a teenager whenever he looked at her a certain way. It was ridiculous. She was 28 years old, not 15. The waitress appeared with a coffee pot, and Manuela gratefully accepted a refill. She needed the caffeine. She'd been staying up too late thinking about Lucas, analyzing every word of their hospital conversation, trying to figure out how she felt about having him back in her life. So, Lucas said, drumming his fingers lightly on the table, tell me about your life. What happened after I left? College? Career? Relationships? He paused on the last word, and she could see the question he wasn't quite asking. You want the highlight reel or the director's cut? She asked, stalling while she decided how much to reveal. All of it, he said simply. I've missed 15 years, Manny. I want to know everything. She took a sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. Well, after you left, I kind of shut down for a while. Grades slipped, stopped hanging out with our old crowd. Grandmother was worried enough to make me see a counselor. Lucas's expression darkened with guilt. Manny, I'm so sorry. Don't, she said firmly. We're not doing guilt trips. You asked what happened, I'm telling you. She adjusted her hair, a nervous gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed. Eventually, I pulled myself together, got my pharmacy technician certification, been working at Raleigh Community Pharmacy for 6 years now. It's not glamorous, but I like helping people. That's exactly what I would have expected, Lucas said softly. You always wanted to take care of everyone. And you always wanted to be a doctor. Looks like we both got what we wanted. She gestured vaguely at his expensive watch, his perfect posture, the way he carried himself now. Neurosurgeon, right? Must be exciting, saving lives and all that. It is, he said, but there was something in his voice that made her look closer. Though I have to admit, the business side has taken over more than I'd like. Board meetings, investor calls, product development. Some days I barely see patients anymore. Is that what you wanted? He rubbed his beard thoughtfully. A gesture she was learning meant he was working through something complex. I wanted to make a difference. Change lives. The money and recognition were supposed to be byproducts, not the goal. He met her eyes. What about relationships? Please tell me you didn't let one stupid teenager's mistake ruin your faith in love entirely. Manuela nearly choked on her coffee. Wow, subtle segue there, Dr. Sumner. I'm out of practice with subtlety, he admitted with a sheepish grin. 15 years of medical school and surgical training don't leave much room for social finesse. Despite herself, she found his honesty disarming. There have been attempts, a few serious relationships in college, some casual dating since then, nothing that stuck. She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Turns out I have trust issues. Who knew? The guilt was back in his eyes, but he didn't apologize again. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. What kind of trust issues? The kind where I sabotage things before they can sabotage me, she said, with more honesty than she'd intended. The kind where I assume people will leave so I make it easy for them. Manny. His voice was gentle, understanding in a way that made her chest tight. Don't look at me like that, she said, reaching for her coffee again. I'm fine. I have a good life. Great friends, stable job, apartment with decent water pressure. I don't need... What? He asked when she stopped mid-sentence. I don't need someone to complete me, she finished, but the words felt hollow even as she said them. Lucas studied her for a long moment, his green eyes seeing too much. What if it's not about completing you? What if it's about choosing to share your already complete life with someone who appreciates how incredible you are? Her phone buzzed, saving her from having to respond to that loaded statement. A text from Tasha appeared on the screen. How's the coffee date going? Need me to call with a fake emergency? Or are you actually talking about your feelings like a grown-up? Lucas caught her smile at the message. Let me guess. Tasha checking in. She's protective, Manuela said, typing back quickly. Still alive. We'll call later. I'd like to meet her sometime, Lucas said. Anyone who takes care of you is automatically on my good side. You can't just say things like that, she protested. Why not? Because, she struggled to find the words. Because it's too easy. This whole thing, sitting here talking like 15 years didn't happen, like we can just pick up where we left off. It's not that simple, Lucas. I know it's not simple, he said quietly, but maybe it doesn't have to be complicated either. Maybe we can just see where this goes, one coffee at a time. And what happens when your fancy medical conferences start calling? When you remember that you're Dr. Lucas Sumner, neurosurgeon to the stars, and I'm just Manny who counts pills for a living. First of all, Lucas said, his voice firm, you're not just anything. You're Manuela Denise Gaines, the woman who makes everyone's day better just by existing. The woman who remembered watermelon popsicles after 15 years. The woman who was brave enough to walk into that hospital room and turn my entire world upside down. Lucas. Second, he continued, I've been Dr. Sumner for a long time now. It's impressive on business cards and intimidating in boardrooms, but it's also exhausting. Do you know how long it's been since someone called me just Lucas? Since someone looked at me and saw the person instead of the title? His words hit her like a physical force, and she found herself staring down at her coffee, overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze. This is crazy, she whispered. Maybe, he agreed, but crazy doesn't always mean wrong. Her phone buzzed again, another text from Tasha, this time just a string of fire emojis and a gif of someone fanning themselves dramatically. Your friend has interesting timing, Lucas observed, clearly seeing the screen. She has a gift, Manuela said dryly, and apparently no sense of boundaries. I like her already. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of possibility settling between them like a third presence at the table. Finally, Lucas spoke again. Can I ask you something? You've been asking me things all afternoon. This is different. He drummed his fingers on the table again, a nervous energy she recognized from their childhood. That last day, before I left, we were talking about homecoming, about going together. If I hadn't disappeared, if I'd asked you properly, and what would you have said? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Manuela felt her heart skip, remembering that afternoon with perfect clarity, the way he'd smiled, the way her stomach had fluttered with anticipation, the way she'd practiced her answer in the mirror that night. I would have said yes, she admitted quietly. I was hoping you'd ask. Lucas closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, they were bright with something that looked like regret and hope tangled together. I was going to, he said. I had it all planned out. I was going to ask you properly, maybe even get you a corsage. I wanted to do it right. Lucas, I know we can't go back, he said quickly. I know too much has changed. But Manny, what if we could go forward instead? Girl, you're overthinking this to death, Tasha said, stretching into downward dog on her yoga mat, while Manuela paced around her living room like a caged animal. It was Friday evening, and Manuela had shown up at Tasha's apartment unannounced, clutching a bag of stress-eating snacks and wearing the expression of someone who'd been wrestling with life-altering decisions for 3 days straight. I'm not overthinking, Manuela protested, opening a bag of chips with more force than necessary. I'm being realistic. There's a difference. Tasha flowed into cobra pose, her colorful bandana keeping her afro perfectly in place. Her apartment reflected her personality, plants everywhere, tapestries on the walls, and a sound system currently playing a chill R&B playlist that usually calmed Manuela's nerves. Today, nothing was working. Okay, let's break this down, Tasha said, sitting up on her mat and giving Manuela her full attention. What exactly are you afraid of? Everything, Manuela said, then caught Tasha's raised eyebrow. Fine. I'm afraid he'll leave again. I'm afraid he won't leave and I'll mess it up. I'm afraid this is all some romantic fantasy that will crash and burn when reality sets in. And I'm afraid that maybe I'm not good enough for the life he has now. The admission came out quieter than the rest, but it hung in the air with the weight of her deepest insecurity. Tasha was quiet for a long moment, studying her best friend with the kind of insight that came from years of friendship. Manny, come sit down. You're making me dizzy. Manuela reluctantly settled onto the couch, pulling a throw pillow into her lap like armor. He texted me today. Oh? Tasha's voice was carefully neutral, but Manuela could see the curiosity in her brown eyes. He asked if I wanted to go to some charity gala with him tomorrow night, said he'd already committed to going, but would rather have company than go alone. And that's a bad thing because it's a charity gala, Tasha. Like fancy dresses and champagne and people who probably own summer homes in the Hamptons. I don't belong in that world. Tasha pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Within seconds, Manuela's phone buzzed with a notification, a meme of a woman looking in a mirror with the caption, "Who told you that you weren't worthy of good things?" "You and your memes," Manuela said, but she was smiling despite herself. "My memes are wisdom disguised as humor," Tasha replied with dignity. "And this one is particularly relevant. Who told you that you don't belong in Lucas's world?" "Nobody had to tell me. I have eyes. I Googled him, Tasha. Do you know how much money he's worth? Do you know what kind of people he associates with? Do you know what kind of person he is?" Tasha countered. "Because from what you've told me, he's the same boy who used to share his lunch money when you forgot yours. Money doesn't change your core, Manny. It just amplifies what was already there." Manuela's phone buzzed again, this time an actual text from Lucas. She glanced at it and her expression softened involuntarily. "What does it say?" Tasha asked, noting the change. "He says if the gala is too much, we could just order pizza and watch bad movies instead. Says he'd actually prefer that." Manuela looked up at her friend. "Who says that? Who turns down a fancy charity event to eat pizza on the couch?" "Someone who wants to spend time with you, not impress you," Tasha said gently. "Someone who remembers what you actually enjoy." "But what if I said yes to the gala and completely embarrassed myself? What if I used the wrong fork or said something stupid to one of his important friends?" Tasha rolled her eyes dramatically. "First of all, it's food. The fork gets it from the plate to your mouth, mission accomplished. Second, you're one of the smartest people I know. You're not going to say anything stupid. You don't know that." "I know you," Tasha said firmly. "I know you're funny and kind and smart and beautiful. I know you light up every room you walk into, even when you don't realize it. And I know that any man worth your time, including fancy doctor man, would be lucky to have you on his arm." Manuela felt tears prick at her eyes. "What if he realizes I'm not worth the trouble? What if he realizes he's not worth your trouble?" Tasha shot back. "This goes both ways, you know. He's the one who left. He's the one who has to prove he's changed. You don't owe him anything just because he wrote you a pretty letter." Before Manuela could respond, her phone rang. Lucas's name appeared on the screen, and she stared at it like it was a live grenade. "Answer it," Tasha whispered, making shooing motions with her hands. "Hello?" Manuela said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," Lucas's voice was warm through the speaker. "I was just thinking, about tomorrow night. I realized I might have put you in an awkward position with the gala invitation. I don't want you to feel pressured to do anything you're not comfortable with." Tasha gestured frantically for Manuela to put the call on speaker, but she ignored her. "It's not that I'm not comfortable," Manuela said carefully. "It's just, that's your world, Lucas, not mine." "Says who?" His voice was gentle but firm. "Manny, I've been to dozens of these events. They're usually boring as hell, full of people talking about themselves and trying to out-donate each other for bragging rights. But with you there, it might actually be fun. I don't even have anything appropriate to wear." "Then we'll go shopping," he said immediately. "My treat. Or better yet, forget the gala entirely. Let's do something you want to do. What makes you happy?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her that? I don't know. Normal things, I guess. Food trucks, farmers markets, that little bookstore downtown that has the cafe in the back." "Perfect," Lucas said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Saturday afternoon, we'll hit the farmers market. I'll bring my questionable knowledge of produce. You bring your expertise in everything else." "You want to go to the farmers market?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "I want to go wherever you'll let me spend time with you," he said simply. "Fancy galas, farmers markets, or sitting in traffic. I don't care as long as you're there." Tasha was making exaggerated swooning gestures from across the room, fanning herself with a throw pillow. "Lucas," Manuela started, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know this is complicated," he said quietly. "I know I'm asking you to trust someone who hurt you before, but Manny, I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere this time, not unless you tell me to." "How can you promise that?" The question came out more vulnerable than she'd intended. "Because I spent 15 years wondering what if, 15 years of success that felt hollow because the most important person wasn't there to share it with me. I'm not making that mistake again." Manuela closed her eyes, feeling the familiar war between hope and fear raging in her chest. "Okay," she said finally. "Farmers market, Saturday afternoon." "Really?" The relief in his voice was unmistakable. "Really? But Lucas?" "Yeah? If you're playing some kind of game with me, if this is just nostalgia or curiosity or whatever, please tell me now, because I can handle rejection, but I can't handle being left behind again. Manuela Denise Gaines, he said, his voice serious now. I'm not playing games. I'm terrified that you'll decide I'm not worth the risk, but I'm not playing games. After they hung up, Tasha stared at her with wide eyes. Girl, that man is in love with you. Don't be ridiculous, Manuela said, but her cheeks were warm. It's been 3 conversations. It's been 15 years of missing you, 3 conversations of finding you again, and a lifetime of loving you, Tasha corrected. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Manuela looked down at her phone, where Lucas had just sent another text. Can't wait for tomorrow. It's been too long since I've seen you smile. I'm going to buy vegetables with a neurosurgeon, she said finally. And try not to overthink it. There's my girl, Tasha said with a grin, sending her another meme, this time a picture of a woman with her arms raised victoriously with the caption, "She said yes to the vegetables." You're the worst, Manuela laughed. I'm the best and you know it. Now go home and pick out something cute for your farmer's market date. I'm thinking sundress and confidence. As Manuela gathered her things to leave, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, anticipation instead of anxiety. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe it was time to stop protecting her heart so fiercely and start trusting it instead. Hey Tasha, she called from the doorway. Yeah? Thank you for everything. Thank me by letting yourself be happy, Tasha replied. You deserve it, Manny. More than you know. The farmer's market was exactly what Manuela needed. Sunshine, fresh air, and the comforting chaos of people going about their normal Saturday routines. She spotted Lucas before he saw her, standing near the entrance, looking slightly out of place in his perfectly pressed khakis and polo shirt. He was checking his phone with that focused intensity she remembered from their childhood, the same expression he'd worn while solving math problems or trying to beat the final level of their favorite video game. You look like you're planning military strategy, she said, approaching from behind. He turned, and his face broke into that devastating smile that made her forget why she'd been nervous. Just making sure I didn't miss any calls from the hospital. Force of habit. He slipped his phone into his pocket, giving her his full attention. You look beautiful. She'd settled on a yellow sundress that Tasha had enthusiastically approved via text, paired with comfortable sandals and a crossbody bag. Nothing fancy, but the way Lucas looked at her made her feel like she was wearing something red carpet-worthy. Thank you, she said, adjusting her hair, a gesture that was becoming automatic whenever he complimented her. So what's the plan? Do you actually know anything about produce, or are we winging it? Complete amateur, he admitted cheerfully. I usually survive on hospital cafeteria food and whatever my housekeeper stocks in the fridge. This is going to be educational. They started wandering through the stalls, and Manuela found herself relaxing as they fell into an easy rhythm. Lucas asked questions about everything. Why she preferred certain vendors, how to tell if peaches were ripe, whether the local honey was really worth the extra cost. His genuine curiosity reminded her of the boy who used to pepper her grandmother with questions about her garden. Okay, confession time, she said, as they stopped at a booth selling fresh corn. I have no idea how to pick good corn either. I usually just grab whatever looks decent and hope for the best. And here I thought you were going to be my produce guru, Lucas said with mock disappointment. Excuse me, you two need some help. The elderly vendor, a weathered man with kind eyes and hands stained from years of farm work, overheard them. First time corn shopping together? Something like that, Manuela said, glancing at Lucas. Well, let me teach you both, the man said, clearly delighted to have eager students. First, you want the husks to be green and tight. For the next 10 minutes, they received an impromptu education in corn selection, complete with hands-on demonstrations. Lucas took notes on his phone, treating it with the same seriousness he probably brought to medical conferences, while Manuela found herself charmed by his earnestness. You're taking notes on corn, she observed as they walked away with a bag of perfectly selected ears. Information is power, he said solemnly, then grinned. Plus, I want to impress you with my corn expertise next time. Next time. The words slipped out before she could stop them. I'm optimistic, he said simply, and something in his tone made her chest warm. They continued through the market, building an eclectic collection of purchases: fresh tomatoes, artisanal bread, local cheese, and a jar of peach preserves that the vendor insisted they try first. Lucas insisted on carrying everything, despite Manuela's protests. You know, this is nice, he said, as they paused near a small stage where a local band was playing acoustic covers. I'd forgotten what it felt like to just wander. No schedule, no agenda. When's the last time you did something like this? she asked, noting the genuine relaxation in his posture. Honestly, I can't remember. Medical school, then residency, then building the practice. Everything's been scheduled down to the minute for years. He rubbed his beard thoughtfully. I used to love Saturday mornings when we were kids. No plans except whatever we could think up. Like the time we decided to build a fort in your backyard and ended up with what basically amounted to a pile of sticks. Hey, that was architectural innovation, he protested. We were ahead of our time. We were 12 and had no idea what we were doing. Some things never change, he said, but he was smiling as he said it. They found a spot on a nearby bench to rest and people watch. Families with strollers, elderly couples holding hands, teenagers trying to look cool while secretly enjoying themselves. The whole tableau of Saturday morning life. I missed this, Lucas said quietly. Not just the market, but this. Sitting with you, talking about nothing important. Everything felt important when we were kids, Manuela replied. Remember how we used to plan our whole futures sitting on my grandmother's porch? You were going to be a doctor, I was going to be a teacher, and we were going to live in houses next door to each other so our kids could be best friends too. You wanted to be a teacher? Lucas asked, genuine surprise in his voice. Elementary school, I wanted to be like Mrs. Rodriguez, my third-grade teacher. She made everything seem magical. Manuela smiled at the memory. What happened to that dream? Life, she said simply. After you left, I kind of lost my direction for a while. By the time I figured things out, pharmacy work seemed more practical, stable, safe. Lucas was quiet for a moment, and she could see him processing this information. Do you ever think about going back to teaching? Sometimes. But I'm 28, Lucas. It's too late to start over. Says who? His voice carried that familiar determination she remembered from their childhood. My attending physician in residency was 45 when he went back to medical school. Said his kids leaving for college made him realize life was too short to spend it doing something that didn't fulfill him. Before she could respond, Lucas's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted slightly. Not annoyed exactly, but resigned. Work? She asked. My business partner. There's some crisis with our latest clinical trial. He looked genuinely torn. I should probably take it, she said, but something cold settled in her stomach. I'll just look at the flowers over there. She watched as he stepped a few feet away, his voice taking on that professional tone she was beginning to recognize. Even from a distance, she could see the change in his posture. Shoulders straighter, movements more precise. He was Dr. Sumner again, not just Lucas. The call lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes of watching him pace and gesture, of seeing him slip back into the world that had shaped him for the past 15 years, the world that didn't include her. When he returned, his expression was apologetic, but distracted. I'm so sorry about that, he said. There's an issue with some data from our latest trials, and the FDA wants answers on Monday. I might need to go, she said, forcing a smile. I understand. No, I don't want to cut this short. We can work around. Lucas, she stood up, shouldering her bag. It's fine, really, this was nice, but you have responsibilities. He studied her face carefully, and she could see him recognizing the shift in her demeanor. Manny, this isn't about choosing work over you. This is just your life, she finished. I get it, I really do. But even as she said the words, she was remembering every time her father had promised to come to her school plays, every boyfriend who had cancelled dates for work emergencies, every person who had shown her that she would always come second to something more important. Can I drive you home? Lucas asked, clearly sensing the distance she was putting between them. Tasha's picking me up, she lied smoothly. Thanks for this morning. It was educational. She walked away before he could respond, pulling out her phone to actually call Tasha. But as she waited for her ride, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just proved her own point, that some things never really changed, no matter how much you wanted them to. Behind her, she could hear Lucas's phone ringing again. Manuela spent Sunday morning aggressively cleaning her apartment and ignoring Lucas's texts. By noon, she'd scrubbed her bathroom until it sparkled, reorganized her entire closet and started a load of laundry that didn't really need washing. Her phone had buzzed 17 times, and she'd resisted the urge to look at every single message. You know you're going to read them eventually, Tasha said from her position on the couch, where she was painting her nails a vibrant purple while providing unwanted commentary on Manuela's emotional state. I'm not ready, Manuela said, attacking her kitchen counter with disinfectant spray. I need to think. Girl, you've been thinking since yesterday afternoon. Any more thinking, and you're going to wear a hole in your brain." Tasha waved her wet nails in the air to dry them. "What exactly are you so afraid of?" "I'm not afraid. I'm being realistic." Manuela moved on to wiping down appliances that were already clean. "Did you see how fast he switched back into doctor mode? One phone call and it was like I wasn't even there." "Okay, but consider this," Tasha said carefully. "The man has a job. A big, important job that probably comes with big, important responsibilities. That doesn't mean he doesn't care about you. It means he cares about work more than he cares about me." The words came out harsher than Manuela intended, revealing the depth of her hurt. Tasha was quiet for a moment, studying her friend's rigid posture. "Is this about Lucas or is this about your dad?" Manuela's hand stilled on the coffee maker. "Don't. Manny, baby, you cannot keep punishing every man in your life for what your father did. Lucas is not—" "I said don't." Manuela turned around, her brown eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and pain. "This isn't about my dad. This is about Lucas showing me exactly where I stand in his priorities." Before Tasha could respond, there was a knock at the door. Both women froze, looking at each other with wide eyes. "Please tell me you didn't give him my address," Manuela whispered. "I didn't give him your address," Tasha said innocently, "but I may have mentioned which pharmacy you work at, and maybe he's smart enough to figure out that there aren't that many Manuela Gaines in Raleigh." The knocking came again, followed by a familiar voice. "Manny, I know you're probably mad at me, but can we please talk? I brought peace offerings." "Peace offerings?" Tasha whispered, grinning despite the tension. "Don't answer it," Manuela hissed. "I can hear you whispering," Lucas called through the door, "and I'm not leaving until you at least let me explain what happened yesterday." Tasha stood up, careful not to smudge her nail polish. "I'm answering it." "Tasha, no," but it was too late. Tasha had already opened the door, revealing Lucas standing in the hallway holding a large bag from Murphy's Diner and wearing an expression of determined contrition. "You must be Tasha," he said with a sheepish smile. "I'm Lucas, and I apparently have some groveling to do." "Oh, I like him already," Tasha said, stepping aside to let him in. "Manny, your boy brought food. That's practically a marriage proposal in my book." "He's not my boy," Manuela protested, but she couldn't help noticing that Lucas looked like he hadn't slept well. His usual perfect appearance was slightly rumpled, and there were dark circles under his green eyes. "I brought your favorite," Lucas said, unpacking containers from the bag. "At least what used to be your favorite. Chocolate chip pancakes, extra whipped cream, and that terrible bacon that's way too crispy but somehow perfect." Despite her anger, Manuela felt her resolve wavering. He'd remembered. After 15 years, he'd remembered her exact breakfast order from Murphy's Diner. "Food doesn't fix everything," she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "I know," Lucas said quietly, "but it's a start." Tasha, ever the diplomat, grabbed her purse and jacket. "I'm going to go get my eyebrows waxed. Take your time, kids. Work this out like adults." She paused at the door. "And Lucas, hurt my girl again and I will personally come for you." "Understood." "Understood," Lucas said solemnly. "Thank you." After Tasha left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the apartment. Manuela stood in her kitchen, arms crossed, while Lucas remained by the door as if afraid to come any closer. "I messed up yesterday," he said finally. "You got a work call. It happens." Her tone was carefully neutral, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "No, I didn't just get a work call. I let work become more important than you in that moment, and that's not okay." He took a step closer. "Manny, can you look at me? Please." Reluctantly, she met his eyes, and the genuine regret she saw there made her chest tight. "I've spent so many years training myself to prioritize the practice, to drop everything when there's a crisis," he continued. "It's become automatic, but that's not an excuse for making you feel like you don't matter." "Do I matter?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "Really, Lucas? Because from where I was sitting yesterday, it felt like you couldn't wait to get back to your real life." Lucas moved closer, his hands clenched at his sides like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. "You matter more than anything. More than work, more than money, more than any of the things I've spent 15 years building." "That's easy to say," she said, adjusting her hair nervously. "But saying it and proving it are different things." "Then let me prove it," he said quickly. "I've been thinking about this all night and I want to show you something." He pulled out his phone, and for a moment Manuela's heart sank, thinking he was about to take another call. Instead, he showed her the screen, a list of missed calls and unread emails that made her eyes widen. 43 missed calls since yesterday afternoon, he said. 67 unread emails. "My business partner has probably given himself an ulcer trying to reach me. Lucas, if it's important, It's always important, he interrupted. There's always a crisis, always something that needs my immediate attention. But you know what I realized last night? For 15 years I've been so focused on building this life that I forgot to actually live it. He sat down heavily on her couch, running his hands through his hair. I have a beautiful house that I barely see, a successful practice that runs fine without me, and enough money to last several lifetimes. But I go to bed every night feeling empty, because none of it means anything without someone to share it with. Manuela felt her anger slowly dissolving, replaced by something more complicated. Lucas, I know you think I'll choose work over you, he said, meeting her eyes. And based on my track record, I can't blame you for that. But Manny, losing you once was the worst mistake of my life. I won't make it again. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be the kind of man who deserves you, the kind of man who puts you first, who shows up when he says he will, who doesn't disappear when things get complicated. He stood up, moving closer to her. I'm saying I love you. I've loved you since we were kids, and I've spent 15 years trying to fill the hole you left behind. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and 15 years of unspoken feelings. Manuela felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his confession. You can't just say that, she whispered. Why not? Because, she struggled to find the words. Because I'm scared. I'm scared that you'll realize I'm not worth changing your whole life for. I'm scared that this is just guilt talking, or nostalgia, or it's love talking, Lucas interrupted gently. Pure, simple, terrifying love, and you're worth everything, Manuela, you always have been. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Tasha. Whatever y'all are talking about, his car is still in the parking lot, which means he's fighting for you. That's what good men do. She's something else, Lucas said, clearly having seen the message. She's the best friend I've ever had, Manuela said. After you, I want to be both again, he said quietly. Your best friend and whatever else you'll let me be. Looking into his green eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope there, Manuela felt the last of her defenses crumbling. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe it was time to stop protecting her heart so fiercely and start trusting it instead. The pancakes are getting cold, she said finally. Is that a yes to talking? He asked hopefully. It's a yes to breakfast, she said, but she was smiling as she said it. And maybe it's a yes to trying again. 2 weeks later, Lucas invited her to his house for dinner, and Manuela discovered that rich people's kitchens were intimidating even when you weren't using them. You could fit my entire apartment in here, she said, running her hand along the marble countertop of his pristine kitchen. Everything was spotless and expensive looking, from the professional-grade stove to the wine fridge that probably cost more than her monthly salary. My realtor called it perfect for entertaining, Lucas said, stirring something that smelled incredible on the stove. He'd insisted on cooking for her, claiming it was one of the few skills he'd picked up during his bachelor years. What she didn't mention was that it's complete overkill for someone who usually eats cereal for dinner. You're making this from scratch? Manuela asked, peering into the pot of what appeared to be homemade pasta sauce. My one culinary party trick, he admitted with a grin. Learned it from my attending's wife during residency. She took pity on me after seeing me survive on vending machine food for 3 weeks straight. The transformation in Lucas over the past 2 weeks had been subtle but noticeable. He'd started turning off his phone during their dates, responding to emails only during designated hours, and generally trying to prove that his words about prioritizing her weren't just talk. Can I help with anything? She asked, feeling slightly useless in the impressive kitchen. Actually, yes, there's something I want to show you after dinner. Something I probably should have shown you weeks ago. He turned from the stove, his green eyes serious. But first, wine. He opened a bottle that probably cost more than she made in a day, but Manuela was learning not to comment on these things. The gap between their financial situations was something they were both still navigating carefully. They ate at his dining room table, which could have seated 12 but felt intimate with just the two of them at one end. The conversation flowed easily. Work stories, childhood memories they'd somehow never shared, their different perspectives on how Raleigh had changed over the years. Okay, Lucas said after they'd finished eating. Before I lose my nerve, I need to show you something. He led her upstairs to what appeared to be his home office, all dark wood and medical textbooks, and framed diplomas that reminded her exactly how successful he'd become. But instead of focusing on his achievements, he went to a closet and pulled out a medium-sized wooden box. I've been carrying this around for 15 years, he said, setting it on his desk. Every apartment in med school, every new city during residency, every house since then. I told myself I kept it for nostalgia, but really, I kept it because letting go felt like giving up on us completely. Manuela's breath caught as she recognized the box. Lucas had made it in shop class during their sophomore year, burning their initials into the lid with shaky teenage hands. She teased him mercilessly about how crooked the letters were. "I can't believe you still have this," she whispered. "Open it," he said quietly. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid and felt her heart stop. Inside was a carefully preserved collection of their shared history, movie ticket stubs from their frequent trips to the Dollar Theatre, photos from school dances and backyard barbecues, notes they'd passed in class when they should have been paying attention to their teachers. But it was the smaller items that made tears prick at her eyes. A pressed flower from the corsage he'd never gotten to give her for homecoming. The friendship bracelet she'd made him in 8th grade, carefully preserved in a plastic bag. A folded piece of paper that, when she opened it, revealed a list in his teenage handwriting. "Things I love about Manny." "Lucas," she breathed, scanning the list. "You wrote this?" "Junior year," he said, sitting on the edge of his desk. "I was trying to work up the courage to tell you how I felt about you. Figured if I could write down all the reasons why, maybe I'd find the words." She read through the list, her vision blurring with tears. Some entries were silly, the way she laughs at her own jokes, and how she always shares her French fries even when she says she won't. Others were achingly sweet. She believes in people even when they don't believe in themselves, and she makes everything better just by being there. At the bottom of the list, in slightly different handwriting as if added later, was one final entry. "She's going to break my heart someday, but loving her will still be worth it." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Because I was 17 and terrified," he said simply. "Because you were my best friend and I was afraid of ruining that. Because I thought we had all the time in the world to figure it out." Manuela continued exploring the box, finding more treasures she'd forgotten existed. A photo strip from the mall photo booth where they'd made ridiculous faces. The program from their high school's production of Romeo and Juliet, where they'd gone together because neither of them had dates. A small piece of paper with her grandmother's recipe for sweet tea, copied in Lucas's careful handwriting. "You asked my grandmother for her sweet tea recipe. She made me promise to take care of you before I could have it," Lucas said with a small smile. "Said a boy who couldn't make proper sweet tea had no business courting her granddaughter. She never told me that. She was protecting you, from my teenage awkwardness mostly." He moved closer, studying her face. "Manny, I know this is a lot. I know it might seem like I'm trying to manipulate your emotions or live in the past. But I wanted you to see that forgetting you was never an option. Even when I tried to move on, even when I told myself it was hopeless, you were always there." She picked up a small velvet box from the corner of the memory collection, opening it to find a simple silver necklace with a tiny compass pendant. "You bought this for my 16th birthday, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wondered what happened to it when I moved out of grandmother's house. You left it on your dresser the night before I moved away. I took it. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't leave everything behind." Manuela closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of 15 years of preservation, of love carefully tended even in absence. When she opened them, Lucas was watching her with an expression of hopeful vulnerability that reminded her so much of their teenage selves. "All this time," she said, "I thought you'd forgotten about me completely. I thought maybe our friendship hadn't meant as much to you as it did to me." "It meant everything," he said quietly. "You meant everything." She stood up, still holding the necklace, and moved closer to him. "I have something too," she admitted. "At home. A shoebox under my bed with letters I wrote you but never sent. Photos I couldn't bring myself to throw away. That terrible poem you wrote me for my 15th birthday. You kept the poem." Lucas looked mortified. "That thing was awful." "It was sweet," she corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "It was honest and awkward and perfectly you." "Manny," he started, but she was already stepping closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "I want to try," she said softly. "Really try. Not just dating or seeing where this goes, but actually building something together. I'm still scared, and I still have trust issues, and I'll probably sabotage things at least 3 more times before I get it right. But Lucas, if you're willing to be patient with me—" "Forever," he said immediately. "I'll be patient forever if that's what it takes." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as 15 years of unresolved feelings poured into the space between them. He tasted like wine and possibility, like coming home after a very long journey. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Manuela rested her forehead against his. "Help me put this on," she asked, holding up the compass necklace. With careful fingers, he fastened the clasp around her neck, the pendant settling just over her heart. It felt like a promise, like a piece of their shared history finally returned to where it belonged. "There's one more thing in the box," Lucas said quietly. She looked back at the collection and found a sealed envelope with her name on it in his adult handwriting, clearly recent. "What is it?" "A letter I wrote last week," he said, "about what I want our future to look like, about the man I want to be for you. You don't have to read it now, but when you're ready, it's there." Manuela picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in her hands. "What if I'm not ready for a future yet? What if I need to start with just right now?" "Then we start with right now," he said, pulling her closer, "and we build tomorrow when we get there." The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, and Manuela knew immediately that everything was about to change. She'd been sleeping peacefully in Lucas's arms, something that had become wonderfully routine over the past month, when his phone started buzzing insistently on the nightstand. He stirred, mumbling an apology as he reached for it, but she was already awake, that familiar cold dread settling in her stomach. "Dr. Sumner," he answered, his voice still rough with sleep. She watched his expression shift from drowsy confusion to sharp alertness as the caller spoke. "What? When did this happen?" Manuela sat up, pulling the sheet around herself as Lucas swung his legs out of bed, already reaching for his clothes. The conversation was mostly medical jargon she didn't understand, but she caught enough to know it was serious. Something about a clinical trial, emergency FDA meetings, and immediate travel required. "I'll be on the next flight," Lucas said, ending the call. He turned to find her watching him with an expression that made his chest tight. "Manny, let me guess," she said quietly. "You have to go. There's been a complication with our new neurological treatment. A patient in the Seattle trial had an adverse reaction, and the FDA is threatening to shut down the entire program." He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his hair. "This represents 5 years of research and $60 million in development costs. If we lose this—" "How long?" she asked. "I don't know. Could be a few days, could be weeks. It depends on what the investigation finds, what the FDA decides." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back slightly. "Manny, I know how this looks. It looks like exactly what I was afraid of," she said, getting out of bed and wrapping his robe around herself. "It looks like the moment something important happens in your world, I become an afterthought. That's not fair." His voice carried an edge of frustration. "This isn't about choosing work over you. This is about people's lives, about a treatment that could help thousands of patients with neurological disorders. And I'm supposed to just smile and say, 'Of course, go save the world,' while I sit here wondering if you're ever coming back. You think I want to leave?" Lucas stood up, his green eyes flashing. "You think I want to get on a plane at 3 in the morning and spend the next however long fighting with bureaucrats and lawyers? I think you're really good at making things sound noble, when the truth is you'd rather be the hero saving everyone else than just a man who stays for the woman he claims to love." The words hit him like a physical blow, and she immediately regretted them, but it was too late. She could see the hurt and anger warring in his expression. "That's what you really think of me?" he asked quietly. "After everything, the letters, the memories, the promises I've made, you still think I'm looking for excuses to run away? I think you're a man who spent 15 years building a life where you're indispensable to everyone, except the people who actually matter to you." Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice remained steady. "I think you're terrified of actually being happy, because being needed feels safer than being loved. And I think you're so scared of being abandoned that you'll sabotage anything good in your life before it has a chance to hurt you," he shot back. "How many times do I have to prove that I'm not leaving before you actually believe it? You're literally packing a suitcase right now. Because I have responsibilities. To everyone but me." They stared at each other across the bedroom, both breathing hard. 15 years of fear and hurt and love, all tangled up in the space between them. Lucas's phone buzzed again, and they both looked at it like it was a snake. "Don't answer it," Manuela said quietly. "Manny, don't answer it, please. Just don't." Lucas looked at his phone, then at her tear-stained face, then back at his phone. She could see him warring with himself, could see the exact moment when duty and love collided in his chest. He declined the call. "There," he said, setting the phone aside. "What now? What do you want me to do? Pretend that people's lives don't depend on the work I've dedicated my career to?" "I want you to choose me," she said, the words coming out broken and desperate. "Just once. I want you to choose me over everything else and mean it. I am choosing you. No, you're not. You're standing here arguing with me about why you have to leave instead of figuring out how to stay. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him thinking, processing, that familiar look of intense concentration she remembered from their childhood. You're right, he said finally. What? You're right. I am looking for reasons to run. He sat heavily on the bed, his shoulders sagging. Not because I don't love you, but because loving you, really loving you, is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Manuela wrapped the robe tighter around herself, her anger beginning to dissolve into something more complicated. When I was building my career, achieving success, making money, all of that felt manageable, Lucas continued. I could control the variables, minimize the risks. But this, us, I can't control whether you'll decide I'm worth the trouble. I can't guarantee that I won't mess this up somehow. So you mess it up on purpose instead. I mess it up in ways that feel familiar. He looked up at her, his green eyes raw with honesty. It's easier to be the guy who has to leave for work than the guy who might not be enough just as he is. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Tasha that simply read, "Whatever y'all are fighting about at 3 a.m., remember that pride is colder than an empty bed." Despite everything, Manuela found herself almost smiling. Tasha says hi. She's texting you at 3 in the morning. She has insomnia and excellent timing. Manuela sat on the bed next to him, leaving space between them but no longer fleeing. Lucas, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to give up your career or stop caring about your patients. I'm asking you to make space for me in your life that doesn't disappear the moment something else needs your attention. How? I don't know, but maybe you start by calling your business partner back and telling him to handle the Seattle situation. Maybe you prove that Dr. Sumner has a competent team that can function without him for once. Lucas was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to respond. Then he picked up his phone and dialed. David, it's Lucas. I know you're expecting me on a plane, but here's the thing. I'm not coming. He paused, listening to what was undoubtedly an explosion of protest on the other end. Because you're perfectly capable of handling this, and because I have something more important to do here. Manuela felt her breath catch as she listened to him calmly deflect every argument, every guilt trip, every attempt to make him change his mind. When he finally hung up, he turned to her with an expression she'd never seen before, nervous but determined. I just told my business partner that I'm taking a leave of absence from the company, he said, effective immediately. Lucas, you can't. I can, and I did. David's been wanting more control for years, and our team is more than capable of handling the FDA situation. He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. Manny, I want to figure out how to be a man who deserves you, not Dr. Sumner, not the neurosurgeon, not the businessman, just Lucas, the guy who still thinks you hung the moon. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to take that teaching job you never pursued. I want to help you figure out if that dream still fits, or if you've grown into new dreams. I'm saying I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to bed next to you every night, and I want to do it without my phone ringing every 5 minutes. And if you regret it, if you miss the excitement, the importance, the rush of being needed by everyone, then I'll figure it out. But Manny, I'd rather spend my life figuring out how to love you better than wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to try. She looked into his eyes and saw the same boy who used to promise her forever while sharing popsicles on her grandmother's porch. But she also saw the man he'd become, successful, confident, and finally ready to risk everything for love. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay. Let's figure it out together. She leaned forward and kissed him softly. But Lucas, if you ever make me compete with your phone again, I'm programming Tasha's number to call you every hour with random memes. Deal, he said, pulling her closer. As long as you promise to stop assuming I'm going to leave every time life gets complicated. Deal. But I'm keeping Tasha on speed dial just in case. As they settled back into bed, Manuela fingered the compass necklace at her throat, the one that had found its way back to her after 15 years. Sometimes, she thought, the best directions were the ones that led you home. 18 months later, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open windows of Jefferson Elementary School as Manuela finished arranging the science experiment materials on her classroom tables. Outside, the North Carolina autumn painted the trees in shades of gold and crimson, and she couldn't help but smile at how perfectly her new life had fallen into place. Mrs. Gaines, is Dr. Lucas really coming to talk to us about brains today? Asked Aisha, one of her third graders, bouncing excitedly near her desk. He'll be here any minute, Manuela promised. adjusting the small compass necklace that had become her daily reminder of journeys that lead you exactly where you're meant to be. And remember, you can call him Mr. Lucas today. He's not here as a doctor. He's here as someone who loves science just like you do. 18 months ago, she never could have imagined this moment. After that life-changing night when Lucas chose to stay, everything had shifted like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. It had taken her 8 months to complete her teaching certification, with Lucas's patient support and Tasha's enthusiastic cheerleading, and another 4 months to land her dream job at Jefferson Elementary. Lucas had kept his promise about the leave of absence, though leave had gradually transformed into strategic withdrawal and then consultant status only. He still maintained connections to his medical work, but now it fit around their life together instead of consuming it. 3 days a week, he worked with a local neurological rehabilitation center. The other days belonged to them, and increasingly to moments like these, where he volunteered to share his love of science with her students. The classroom door opened, and Lucas appeared carrying a box of supplies and wearing his favorite navy button-down shirt, the one Manuela had convinced him looked much better than his formal suits for talking to 8-year-olds. "Good morning, everyone," he called out, and 22 third-graders erupted in excited greetings. Manuela watched him work with the children, explaining complex neurological concepts in terms they could understand, his green eyes lighting up as curious hands shot into the air with questions. This version of Lucas, patient, playful, completely present, was the one she'd fallen in love with all over again. "Mr. Lucas," piped up Marcus, a shy boy who rarely spoke in class, "is it true that Mrs. Gaines was your best friend when you were kids like us?" Lucas glanced at Manuela, his expression soft with affection. "It's absolutely true. We used to sit on her grandmother's porch and talk about what we wanted to be when we grew up. Mrs. Gaines always said she wanted to be a teacher who made learning feel like magic." "Did you always want to be a brain doctor?" asked Destiny, another student. "I wanted to help people feel better," Lucas said thoughtfully. "Sometimes that means being a doctor, and sometimes it means teaching people about how amazing their bodies are, or helping them learn new things after they've been hurt. There are lots of ways to help people." As the children worked on their brain models, crafting neurons out of pipe cleaners and clay, Manuela felt her phone buzz with a text from Tasha. "How's the classroom visit going? Please tell me you're not making heart eyes at him in front of your students." She quickly typed back, "Professional, completely professional. Also, he's wearing the blue shirt." "RIP your professionalism," came Tasha's immediate reply, followed by a gif of someone fanning themselves dramatically. "Everything okay?" Lucas asked quietly, appearing beside her desk while the children worked. "Tasha sends her love and inappropriate commentary," Manuela said with a grin. "Tell her I said she's invited to dinner Sunday if she promises not to send you memes during the meal this time. You know she can't promise that. Then tell her I'm making her favorite dessert anyway." This was their life now. Easy conversations, shared meals, Sunday dinners where Tasha held court with stories from her yoga classes, while Lucas and Manuela did dishes together, bumping hips and stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. "Mr. Lucas," called out Emma, holding up her completed neuron model, "does your brain have special pathways for remembering Mrs. Gaines?" The question was so innocently profound that both adults stopped moving. Lucas knelt down to Emma's level, his expression serious but kind. "You know what, Emma, I think it does. Scientists call them memory pathways, and some of them are so strong that they never fade, even when lots of time passes. Mrs. Gaines has been in my memory pathways since we were your age." "That's so romantic," sighed Chloe, and several of the girls giggled in agreement. After the students left for lunch, Manuela and Lucas sat together in the now quiet classroom, surrounded by the colorful chaos of childhood learning. "Thank you for doing this," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "You're really good with them." "They're amazing," he said, meaning it. "So curious, so eager to understand everything. It reminds me why I love science in the first place. Before it became about business and competition and FDA approvals, before I forgot that the best discoveries happen when you're not afraid to ask questions that seem too simple." He turned to face her fully. "Kind of like how I forgot that the best love happens when you stop trying to control everything and just trust." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, tasting like the apple slices she'd shared with her students, and the future they were building one ordinary moment at a time. "I have something for you," Lucas said when they broke apart, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It's not my birthday," she protested, but she was already curious. It's not that kind of gift. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, clearly old, with careful creases that spoke of years of handling. Remember that list I wrote in high school? The one about everything I loved about you? From the memory box? She nodded, remembering the teenage scrawl that had made her cry. I've been updating it, he said, unfolding the paper to reveal new entries written in his adult handwriting. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on lesson plans. How you save the broken crayons because you say they still have color to give. The face you make when Tasha sends you memes during inappropriate moments. Manuela scanned the new additions, her eyes growing misty as she read entry after entry of tiny details he'd noticed and treasured. Lucas, this is... She trailed off, overwhelmed. I want to keep adding to it, he said quietly, for as long as you'll let me. I want to learn new things to love about you when we're 40 and 50 and 80. I want to fill a whole book with the ways you make the world better just by being in it. You realize that's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, right? Good, he said with that crooked smile she'd loved since they were teenagers, because I'm planning to spend the rest of my life trying to top it. As they gathered up the classroom supplies together, Manuela caught her reflection in the window and barely recognized herself. Gone was the woman who'd been afraid to trust, afraid to hope, afraid to take up space in someone else's important life. In her place was someone who looked happy, genuinely, completely happy. Hey, Lucas, she said as they headed toward the parking lot. Yeah, I love you too. All the versions of you. The serious doctor, the patient teacher, the man who makes terrible jokes when he's nervous. But mostly, I love the version who came back for me. I never really left, he said, taking her hand as they walked. I just took the longest possible route home. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the house they'd bought together, a modest place with a big backyard perfect for the barbecues they hosted every month, Manuela thought about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. Sometimes the most important journeys were the ones that brought you back to where you started, but with eyes clear enough to finally see what had been there all along. Tasha's car pulled into the driveway, music thumping loud enough to wake the neighbors, and they could see her dancing in the driver's seat. Some things never change, Lucas observed with amusement. Thank God, Manuela replied, and meant it. As her best friend bounded up the porch steps with takeout containers and probably a dozen new memes to share, Manuela fingered her compass necklace one more time. North had always been toward love, she realized. She just needed to learn how to read the directions. First und Messias. What would you have done in Manuela's place? Would you have had the courage to love someone who had hurt you before, or would you have protected your heart at all costs? Have you ever experienced a love that felt worth the risk of everything? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.